So let's just take it back to the beginning.
Sure.
42 years in office is a really long time. What made you want to get into politics in the first place?
I wanted to make a difference. I always liked politics, going back to my mother's influence. And having worked for George Voinovich for almost 2 years really inspired me to go into public service. And to sit and to drive around the county, George Voinovich, the future mayor, governor, and U.S. Senator was invaluable to me. So I picked up political skills. I also went back to school to learn about the law, because law and politics are intertwined. They're one and the same. And it's good to know that. So
What would you say now, after all these years, is the greatest lesson that you've learned by sitting in this office?
the greatest lesson that I've learned being mayor that I would tell everybody else would simply be yourself, be honest, don't fake anything. If you do not know the answer to a question being asked, say, I don't know, or I'll get back to you. The worst thing you could do is bluff, because people will see through that, and then you lose credibility.
You know, you've met many presidents, and we just lost George Herbert Walker Bush. And so we've seen a lot of coverage, and that really cool handwritten note that he left for President Bill Clinton when Clinton was coming in and George H.W. was going out.
Sure.
And he talked about the fact that there would be challenges and there would be critics and staying the course. Um, what what has been your greatest lesson when you face challengers, and critics?
When I face challenges or crisis, what I try to do is stay calm and try to seek out people to help in solving the problem. And you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And I'm very particular who I hire. And I've got a great staff here of cabinet people. So again, if you don't know the answer, my idea is let's have a meeting, round table, find out what the answers are, what everybody's opinion is, and then the final decision is always the mayor or the governor or the president, because that's where the buck stops, as Harry Truman said.
Being here for 42 years, you've certainly seen the growth of a city. So if you look back from day one and you see all that has happened over those decades, it's probably hard to answer this next question because I'm sure you have, like, they're all your children along the way, but what are some of your proudest accomplishments?
Well, my proudest accomplishments, it would not be one, it would be a list. Because you'd have to have a list. All mayors, number one, have to pay attention to money, the finances of the city. You have to balance the books. You have to make sure there's enough money there to do all the public improvements, the projects, building a wonderful community center like I did in 2000, hiring police and firemen, making sure the streets are paved, the sewers are functional. So it's a combination of many categories, all have to function as one. Public safety, finances, service, recreation, parks. And you have to be a good listener. What I found most people they're not good listeners. And you're not going to learn anything if you're not a listener, good listener, if somebody is trying to give you advice. And what I've learned, some of my best critics or worst critics have been the ones that have been correct. And then when I deal with that critic who's criticizing me, I like to startle them. I'll say, you know what? You're right and I'm wrong. Thank you for that idea, because I'm going to correct my ways, and it's going to be better because of you.
That's so interesting, that whole concept of listening, because if you listen without necessarily having an agenda, you actually have accomplishments. You get somewhere, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Especially if you're after the facts and the truth. So you put your ego aside. Somebody may have said something bad about you, but still focus on that because they may be right. Or occasionally they may be wrong, and then you stand your ground. You stand your ground on principle. You're wrong. We're not going to do it that way. Maybe we'll find a better way in the future, but right now, this is my opinion, and this is the way we're going to do it. That's
This-
a leader.
This is your city. Like, this is your city. You live here. You've governed over it. You love it. You've been a champion of building it. What do you love so much about the city of Middleburg Heights?
What I love about the city is the people of the city, the people that elected me for 19 elections. That's quite extraordinary. And I look at that as an honor and a privilege. And I never took it for granted. In other words, if I was serving my 10th year as mayor or 20th year as mayor, or even today, my 37th year, I'm going 100 miles an hour. I'm still writing out lists, ways to improve the city. I'm even working on what's called my master plan, which I was always good at, Middleburg 2025. This is the way the city should look, and these are the projects and programs and how to keep the city on top and how to continue to improve the city, to make it a great place, not only to live here, but also to work and to run a business.
It's interesting you say that because on my way here I was listening to an audio tape of Jim, the great Jim Rohn talking, who is a wonderful motivational speaker, and he said everybody should have a list of goals. Have you always had a list of goals?
My mother taught me have a list always, and I have to-do lists everywhere. And sometimes I'll wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm waking people up and I'm writing something down, turning on the lights. Sometimes they've been brilliant, sometimes they haven't. So the answer is absolutely yes. You could get ideas from anybody. You know, it could be from the cleaning lady, it could be a police officer, it could be an irate resident who we didn't handle something correctly. It could be maybe a mayor that I've met, and a lot of ideas come from mayors. So the important aspect is be friends with everybody, and that's what I try to do. And whether they're Republican or Democrat, I didn't care. All I cared about is how to improve the city. How can I be a better mayor? And how do I stick around for 42 years?
I know school safety is really important to you, and you've seen a lot of changes just happen in the world during your time as mayor. We visited one of your middle schools today and spoke with a police officer who is on duty and on staff over there. And we sit here today on the 6th anniversary of the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School. And I know that lit a fire for you because protecting our kids is so important. Can you talk a little bit about how you were impacted by some of these school shootings and the violence in schools, and what you were not going to stand for in the city of Middleburg Heights, and how you're going to protect your children?
I was sitting up, I woke up one Saturday morning, and Sandy Hook out of Connecticut was evolving. These precious children, these adults that were murdered, emotionally affected me. So what I did was I got out my legal pad and I said to myself, what can we do to make sure that's preventable, or doing the best possible way, making sure it doesn't happen in Middleburg Heights, and ideas that I could share with surrounding communities in Northeast Ohio. So I came up with an idea of evaluating all of our schools in Middleburg Heights to make sure the cameras are functioning, the lights were functioning, to make sure they had escape routes, that everybody was trained. So what I did was I hired 2 ex-Secret Service directors, not just agents, but I hired Lou Merletti and L.J. Boron. And there's only been a couple in the history of the country. They were right here in Cleveland. So I hired them to evaluate all our schools and put together a plan, and we did that. The second thing I did was to hire 2 Middleburg Heights police officers and place them in our schools to make sure they're properly trained, that they know how to relate to students, that they know ahead of time that there might be a problem, and here's a chance to maybe prevent it. And it's worked out well. Right now we have 2 armed, they're called SROs, school resource officers, in both our middle school here in Middleburg Heights and at Big Creek Elementary. And it has been working out magnificently. And I thank our new chief, Ed Tomba, for assisting me, who's made enormous amount of changes since he's been the chief here. in a very short period of time. And we're blessed to have Ed Tomba.
We spoke with Ed, and wow, what a coup for you. Like to have Ed Tomba here in the city of Middleburg Heights is huge. He has such a storied career and has done so many amazing, wonderful things, and certainly safety has been a priority for him. He's been here for 15 months. Have you loved the changes he's made already?
He has made more changes than anybody in the last 20 or 30 years in the last 15 months. He's been remarkable. One of the most important goals that he established was to restore a high morale in the department by going around and talking to everybody one-on-one and being a good listener and finding out ways where do we need to improve our police department. We need to be more accountable. We need to be more transparent. We need more education. We need new technologies, and he did that. One of the first changes he made, we've had problems over the years with our jail and compliance. What he did was he came up with an idea of transferring our jail responsibility to another jail facility with highly trained officers in the city of Strongsville. He did that. The other change he made was the SROs, helping me, assisting me in putting together a program, placing officers in our departments as well. I also wanted to diversify the workforce. I wanted to hire more women police officers, and we did that. We also have more women now on our civil service list. Women represent over 50% of our population. Why don't we have more women? So we've impacted that area as well.
You know, Ed talked about the whole process of seeing that there was a position open and going through the process of applying and interviews, and that all happens, right, when someone's looking for a job. But you had to be excited when you saw he was interested. Like, you had to think, like, this could be awesome for us.
We clicked from the first time. By the way, we went on a national search to find the best police chief in the United States, then the state of Ohio, then the region. And it was just the first time he was interviewed, we knew we had something special. And so does all the employees in the police department, the employees at City Hall, and also the residents. He is a true public servant that has it in his heart to make sure that Middleburg Heights is going to be the safest place in the state of Ohio, and he's accomplished a lot of that. We just hired 5 new police officers through an idea called lateral transfers. In other words, you look at other advertise, you avoid the civil service test, and you hire officers that maybe have 2 or 3 years experience in a different department, police department, that are already trained. We saved $30,000 per officer, or $150,000 total on hiring the 5 new officers that are now Middleburg Heights police officers, thanks to his new policy and thanks to my cooperation with him. And that is $150,000. That's a huge savings to us. And that's going to be poured back in our department and our city.
Back to talking about protecting your schools, which is, you know, a huge focus for you, very big initiative. You must have great responses from the parents who, they have to be thrilled that you are actually doing something concrete to protect their children in the school.
The support from the mothers and the fathers has been staggering, overwhelming. I cannot tell you the letters I've received, the posting on Facebook, the response. What is more precious than protecting our children? Nothing else matters unless they're protected. This is a different day and age than when I was mayor 15 or 20 years ago. These copycat killers are different. They have no conscience whatsoever. And we have to do the best job possible. Not only do we have officers, by the way, but in our police departments, now we have them also in Polaris Vocational School, but we go through regular drills. They're called tabletop exercises, whereby we have mock drills on active shooters, mock drills to make sure that everybody is in the right place at the right time. The students are reacting, the parents are reacting, making sure that we're communicating with them, the principals, the teachers, everybody. So not only do we have to have these policies in place, written down, you have to practice them. And Ed Tamba is doing that.
You seem to be someone who also adapts to change well. Like, you understand that the way it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you want to adapt so that you stay current, right?
Yes.
What's been your approach to change, or your take and mentality on change?
I am not dogmatic in any way, stuck conservatively or rigidly in my behavior or the way, just because it was done right 10 years ago or 5 years ago. The world is always changing. There's always a new way of improving. And that's one of the methods I've used to stay on top of the city: the finances, public safety, streets, how to plow streets, how to repair sewers. That is always changing. You have to stay on top of that. Here's something that we just changed a few weeks ago. We don't have shotguns in our police cars anymore. We now have rifles that we had to put into our cars. And I asked Chief Tombo, what's wrong with shotguns? That's an old practice. Well, you don't go into schools today if you have an active shooter there with a shotgun, because you'll hit a lot of people. You have to be precise. So that's a change that we made, thanks to Ed Tamba.
So I think you've been innovative, you've been forward thinking. So I'll have you look into your crystal ball and you look ahead to where the city of Middleburg Heights is going in the next 10, 20 years. What do you see for the city? What do you hope for the city?
I hope that the practices, the ideas that have been in place, that's been adopted, continue. With the support of City Council, the residents, the business community, we have one of the best business development plans since 2006, where we have developed and retained thousands of jobs here in the city. And that's why I've been able to keep taxes very low, because the residents pay low because the businesses help absorb the expenses that we have. And we create a job for people. If you look at surveys in the country, what's the number one topic all the time? Well, either one or two is jobs. What are you going to do to help me? I'm unemployed. And we have done that in Middleburg Heights through a planned, systematic device and plan that we've had in place that's worked. So that will forever work with economic incentives. Sometimes businesses that come into Middleburg Heights say, look, we're looking to maybe, can you help us out in terms of economic incentives? We need maybe some program that's going to save us $10,000 or $20,000. What can you do to help us, to make the deal, to sweeten the deal? And we do that because we're able to bring maybe 300 jobs here. And that has a residual effect. That helps all the other businesses in the community, keeps taxes very low for our residents, and keeps our city services at an all-time peak, superior. And so I look for that to be in place, and hopefully new ideas will change as well. Somebody with a new idea will help us as well.
You love your job, don't you?
I'm passionate about my job. I've always loved politics since I was a young boy. I go home and what do? I'm watching C-SPAN. I'm watching CNN. I watch Fox. So I'm fascinated. I love watching biographies. I'm reading biographies on our presidents. I love studying presidents. What worked, what didn't work. What worked with Franklin Roosevelt, for instance. What worked with John F. Kennedy. Even Richard Nixon, even though he had his faults. He was an innovator as well.
You've met many presidents. What is one of the lessons you've learned from one of the presidents you've met?
Well, I've met Republicans and Democrats. I was impressed with both George Bush 41 and 43. I've also had an opportunity to meet Bill Clinton. And what's remarkable about Bill Clinton is if you meet him and there's 100 people in a room, he is looking in your eye, he's focusing on you, and he is listening to you. And he'll follow up with a question. And he's genuinely interested in what you're having to say, with maybe an idea that he could absorb. He's asked me for my advice over the years. I mean, what takes you, how do you become a successful politician? I've also asked him that as well. And he's been a remarkable president during his 8 years. We've had the highest prosperity in the history of our country, one of the highest, balanced budgets. But he also learned to compromise, and that's something missing today. We have too many people on the far right and the far left, far right, that doesn't compromise. They think their ideas are the only ideas. They worry about their reelection in the future. Well, you have to stand for principle, and you have to look out for the taxpayers and the citizens of your city, your state, and the country. And that's what's missing in our country today.
That's all great. Is there anything else you want us to get, Andrew?
No, I don't think so.
No, I think that was awesome.
I want my
Well,
notes.
Ask him moving to.
Well, my parents, as I moved from the city of Parma, I was getting ready to go to junior high and then high school, and they said back 13 years old, you're moving to Middleburg Heights. And when I got out here, it was all farm area. There was nothing here. As compared to Parma, they had Parma Town developing over there. They had playgrounds, children, but I adjusted. And to make a long story short, I became the mayor of Middleburg Heights. I don't know whether I would ever become the mayor of Parma, but who knows? But my mother and father always seemed to make the right move. And they're looking down on me right now saying, we're proud of you, and I'm proud of my parents as well, what they did for me. And they supported me 100%. And I'm blessed with that.
You helped build this city.
And I didn't do it on rock and roll. I built it on good ideas. Test and tried.
Yeah.
So I've enjoyed it.
Are you good?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Awesome.